you describe what's happened to your income and the number of gigs that you get?
Sometimes I only play once a week, sometimes I don't play at all.
COVID lockdown casualties in the music business.
It looked like a scene from an apocalypse movie or something, you know? It was really something.
We're off to Music City to hear how COVID shutdowns produced the sounds of silence.
I noticed there's no black smoke coming from the smokestack.
There is not. So what you're seeing coming out of that stack right now is water vapor and about 12.5% CO2.
And once one of the nation's most polluting industries, a look at fascinating technology to keep coal alive.
Why would you say, in a nutshell, it is that America can't seem to win wars?
I believe that the most concise answer is because we don't understand what it means to even win wars.
And a former warrior who called out the Pentagon for faking success in Afghanistan talks about why the world's most powerful military needs to rethink what it takes to win.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Most industries have struggled under the weight of COVID-19 shutdowns and restrictions. Few have been hit harder than the music business, and the economic impact is tremendous. In the U.S. alone, nearly 2 million jobs are said to hinge on the music industry. Today, we take you to the place nicknamed Music City to ask what's the long-term impact after the government says the music can't play.
Sasha McVeigh is considered lucky to be performing in downtown Nashville, even if it is to a mostly empty bar.
Can you describe what's happened to your income and the number of gigs that you get?
Yeah, sometimes I only play once a week, sometimes I don't play at all, because sometimes I'll be getting ready for a gig and I'll get the call from the venue saying, we've had 3 customers all day, we can't have you come in and play. Which sucks, but I can understand where they're coming from just the same as I can understand why I want to play and make money. So my income has essentially been cut. Sometimes it's been cut in half, and sometimes there is no income whatsoever.
The name of the venue is Redneck Riviera, owned by country music star John Rich.
I'm just a country boy, and yes, I do enjoy showing them city folk my hell-raising ways.
This is the heartbeat of country music right here. This is Broadway, lower Broadway.
He's showing us the view from the roof of the bar.
When everything was shut down, did you come up to the roof and look out one day and just go, wow, I never thought I'd see?
It looked like a scene from an apocalypse movie or something, you know? It was really something. So when you talk about something like COVID, our whole industry revolves around what? Crowds. Crowds. And you can't have crowds when you got COVID going on.
It's estimated that before the COVID-19 shutdowns, the music industry added $8.6 billion a year to the Nashville economy. As much as 70% of that, upwards of $6 billion, vanished in 2020. 130,000 local jobs, many related to music, were lost.
Stay home, stay home.
Rich, who sang a song about the shutdown with his partner Big Kenny, says established stars can afford to take the hit. The up-and-comers cannot.
Homeschool's now in session and I'm pulling out my hair. It's halfway through the morning, I'm still in my underwear. Stay home.
I think people can understand how business people have been hurt and the bottom line of an artist who's struggling may be hurt. But what do you see as perhaps the impact artistically of the talent pool and what will be coming out of Nashville because of this lull, I guess you would call it, that we've been going through?
That's a great question because, you know, you got to think every big country artist you've ever heard of started on this street. So all these people that you don't know their name that are currently playing on this street and the ones that have had to go back home, those are your next Garth Brookses and your next Big and Riches and your next Tim McGraw's, your next Faith Hills. That's who they are. Like those people are some of them are gonna wind up being the next crop of really, really great artists, and they're not here. So I don't know what the effect of that will be.
Add to that the fact that some of the places that help turn artists into stars are out of business.
For more than 3 decades, Douglas Corner Cafe was a legend in live music performances here in the 8th Avenue South neighborhood of Nashville. But thanks to the coronavirus shutdown and restrictions, it's permanently closed. So this was what?
We had live music. We had bands, singer-songwriters.
Recording engineer Mervyn Luke bought Douglas Corner Cafe in 1987.
Songwriters would sit around the beer tub, tell stories, drink beer, and just play.
Well, welcome to Douglas Corner, everybody.
Thank you for being a friend. Maybe I didn't love you.
Oh, yeah.
Quite as often as I could have. Every little thing that you do, baby, I'm amazed by you. Na, 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 na.
Garth Brooks used to play here as a songwriter. Did his first fan club party here, which was packed. Trisha Yearwood used to sing here as backup for another group, and then did showcases here. Alan Jackson showcased here.
How important are venues like this in terms of making the next star and just keeping the industry going?
A town like Nashville and clubs like this is where you get seen. Once you're a star, the machine gets behind you. But until that, you can't just go knock on doors and say, let me come in and play for you. And that isn't really what you do anyway. It's what you do in front of an audience or what you do on stage. Small stages with no fluff, you know. It's not the big lights and the pyrotechnics and all that go on with it. Just raw, just out there.
Douglas Corner Cafe ended its storied history on March 15th last year.
I was watching the news on a Sunday evening when the mayor came on and said that he was closing businesses, all the bars and restaurants in Davidson County because of COVID. I would say it was about the middle of June when I saw that they weren't opening up to phase 3 and moving on to open up businesses. I decided, I don't know how long this is going to last, and I can't keep paying everyone and hanging on for nothing. So I just made a decision to close. That's agonizing. And that's not just happening to me, it's happening all over the country.
Beyond Nashville, the global music industry is said to be worth up to $50 billion. In one survey, 3/4 of music creators said they're making less music since COVID-19. Back in Music City, they're still grappling with what will be the impact on a generation of would-be stars. Some of them have gone home and may never return.
When everything started to reopen again, I reached back out to the bands and the people that I played with, like people that have been in this town for decades. And I was getting answers like, oh, sorry, I've moved back to North Carolina, or I've gone back to live with my parents, or I've had to relocate and do this, or I've changed career paths. And it was just mind-boggling to realize that something that's literally a part of who you are has been taken away from you through no fault of your own.
And you know, the old phrase, must be present to win. That's true, and especially in Nashville. You could be the greatest singer in the world, but if you're living out in Tucson or Seattle or somewhere else, you're not in Nashville, you're not going to get noticed. You know, you got to make the commitment to come here, and thousands of people do. But because of COVID and killing and crushing these bars like it has, a lot of them have gone back home. I hope they come back.
You've been the devil, you've been a friend. Hey, rock bottom, how you been?
There's bipartisan support for the COVID relief bill passed by Congress in December that had provisions for grants to help live venues, entertainers, and artists. Ahead on Full Measure, a fascinating clean coal contest. Today's modern coal plants are not your daddy's coal plants, and we recently found out about a unique engineering contest being held to make them even cleaner. We're off to northeast Wyoming near the town of Gillette.
This is Dry Fork Station coal plant near Gillette, Wyoming. Fueled by a coal mine about a mile away, it's equipped with new technologies, making it one of the cleanest and cheapest of its kind in the U.S.
And I noticed there's no black smoke coming from the smokestack.
There is not. And the cool thing about it is this is a very new power plant that employs all of the newest technologies, from sulfur dioxide scrubbers, mercury controls, ash controls, all those sort of things. So what you're seeing coming out of that stack right now is water vapor and about 12.5% CO2. Some technologies...
Jason Beggar says the question is, what can be done to erase that final 12.5% of carbon dioxide, or CO2, which is regulated as a pollutant when it's produced by the industry.
So let's use technology to...
Beggar is managing director of the state's Integrated Test Center, housed here, where researchers can plug and play.
So the test center, what we've done is between the stack in this building, you'll see kind of a large tube, a bluish-gray tube, the diagonal moves over. We're diverting about 5% of the power plant's exhaust gas into a manifold system, which is a network of pipes to allow researchers and technology developers access to that flue gas. You know, it's the right pressures, it's the right temperature, it's real-world conditions that you just cannot model in a laboratory space.
When you say it's plug and play, what do you mean by that?
So what we've done here is we tap into the power plant, we access that flue gas, which comes into this duct here, and then we have 6 spots like this, where it's an 8-inch duct where they can bring their technology, they tie into it, you know, they have access to that flue gas.
So they can get some dirty emissions to experiment with.
Exactly, it's exactly what it is.
Engineering teams from around the world were chosen to compete here at this site and another in Canada for the Carbon X Prize.
Today, our planet's atmosphere contains more carbon dioxide than we've ever seen in human history.
The goal is to see who can develop the best practical ideas to use CO2 flue gas.
But what if we didn't have to choose between our economy and our environment? What if we could turn our carbon liability into an asset?
This solar contraption at Dry Fork is part of the Carbon X Prize contest.
We call the reactor the highlight reactor.
Mihir Gada is a process engineer for Dimensional Energy. They're trying to turn solar energy and carbon dioxide into a marketable product used to make jet fuel.
This is a solar concentrator which is focusing the sunlight into a small area so that it gets converted into heat and generates a huge temperature, which we can use as a reaction medium to convert carbon dioxide into a useful product. What we are producing is called syngas, which is an intermediate for the fuels industry. So syngas can be converted into liquid fuels.
Steps away, these cinder blocks are also part of the Carbon X Prize contest. CO2 is actually used in the concrete. UCLA project scientist Iman Medipur is part of the Carbon Built team.
So if we can cut the cement content to produce construction materials and use the waste flue gas to produce concrete materials, I think that would be a good saving or good mitigation of the CO2 emission in the world.
The industry has done a really great job of engineering solutions for sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, mercury, ash, those types of things. And so we see sort of the last hurdle is carbon capture, carbon controls. And so can we engineer a technology solution like we've done for all of those other pollutants to one day get to a power plant that the only thing they're emitting is water vapor?
Imagine a world where everything around you is made from carbon emissions. From the products you use every day to the clothes you wear, to the roads you drive on, to the buildings you live in.
If we can sell cinder blocks or chemical feedstocks or carbon fiber or all of those things, you know, hand sanitizer, vodka, if there's an economic profit driver behind that, then it's probably going to happen a lot sooner.
2 winners of the X Prize will be announced later this year and split a $15 million cash prize. Ahead on Full Measure, the reason why one military analyst claims America isn't winning wars anymore. From Afghanistan to Iraq, a lot of military observers say America can't seem to win wars even though we have the most powerful army on the planet. A new book examines why. It's called The 11th Hour in 2020 America, How America's Foreign Policy Got Jacked Up and How the Next Administration Can Fix It. I recently spoke with the author, former Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. I began by asking about a controversy in 2012 when he went public with a report that claimed the surge of U.S. troops in Afghanistan was not a success. What was the upshot of what you said?
The upshot is that the senior leaders of our military and defense department knowingly were telling America that the war was getting better when they knew that it was not and it was going bad. And if something doesn't change, we were going to continue to eventually suffer a strategic defeat, which I think has happened in the last 8 years.
Those revelations brought Davis national notoriety as an active duty military officer blowing the whistle on how the U.S. war in Afghanistan was headed toward failure. Some likened Davis to anti-Vietnam War activist Daniel Ellsberg, who in 1971 released the Pentagon Papers, documents detailing how 4 administrations had misled the public about the degree of U.S. involvement in Vietnam.
Daniel Ellsberg, ex-Pentagon employee, made history by leaking to the New York Times the Pentagon Papers.
Because the documents were highly classified, Ellsberg was charged with espionage and conspiracy. During trial, it was learned the FBI illegally wiretapped Ellsberg, and the case against him was dismissed.
Why would you say, in a nutshell, it is that America can't seem to win wars?
I believe that the most concise answer is because we don't understand what it means to even win wars. And I don't know if it's the fact that the civilian leaders just don't really understand what the military can do. It's wishful thinking. They hope that it works out this way. I'm not sure, but what I am absolutely sure about is that the missions that we have given the military over 2 decades at least are militarily unattainable, and they're not even connected to a strategic outcome. And that is the biggest problem.
It seems like as part of these wars, like in Afghanistan, after seeing what our troops are tasked to do, I would describe it as a lot of social work, because they go into Afghanistan and they're supposed to rebuild the schools and tell the women that they can be anything they want to and get them involved in government and law enforcement and things that seem far removed from fighting a war.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I saw that. I mean, as I was going through Afghanistan in 2010 and 2011, you know, I talked to all these brigade commanders, battalion commanders, company commanders, troops on the ground, the guys who actually went, you know, on the patrols, and that was all they were always talking about was, we have built this many schools, we built this many kilometers of roads, you know, we helped these people here, we brought food into this place, and, you know, those are all nice things. But what does that have to do with winning a war, and how is that ever going to result in a military unit ending a war?
That brings another comparison to Vietnam.
Victory is tempered by mercy, as the Leathernecks distribute their own sea rations.
The U.S. military strategy intended to win the hearts and minds of Vietnamese civilians against the communist Viet Cong was largely considered a failure.
And then when you get into the more complicated situations like, well, let's have the government be less corrupt and let's have them be more effective and more efficient. Well, those aren't military tasks at all. We're neither equipped to do that, and it's just not something that the military is ever designed to do, but that's what we're trying to make them do.
Is there any financial motivation to fight wars in the inefficient way that you described, do you think?
Well, I mean, there is. It's beyond question that there is. And, you know, and a lot of it's not so much that, you know, people are running around and, you know, in the shadows and, you know, rubbing their hands and saying, yay, we can make a lot of money. It's usually cloaked in patriotism and, you know, we need this to defend our country and we have to have this bulwark out there, and so we need all of these, you know, extra troops here. We need to keep them there to keep from being attacked, and yeah, that ends up making us money, so yeah, that's good.
But who's making the money? Are we talking about defense contractors, people who support the troops and build the equipment and so on?
Yeah, I mean, look, we got to be honest, and the fact is that many of these members of Congress that either support these wars or fund them or refuse to end them are also the ones, it's just a fact, are the ones that get the biggest financial contributions from defense contractors and companies that make money off of these things. And then they have all these lobbyists that they spend millions of dollars every year convincing all these people, all these members of Congress, it's in your interest to do this. So you see those things, and it's a symbiotic relationship, and the net result is these wars keep being fought.
Davis says the big takeaway from his book is keep a strong military and use it to defend from any attack, but use diplomacy to deal with other problems. We'll be back with a look at what's ahead next week on Full Measure. An update to the excruciating legal case involving the Raven 23 team of Blackwater security guards. All 4 men who were in prison are now free after pardons from President Trump in his final days in office. Nick Slatton and the other decorated ex-military officers insisted they acted in self-defense. In 2007, they were escorting a U.S. diplomat to safety in Iraq after a car bombing when they say a vehicle came at them like a suicide bomber. There was a vicious exchange of gunfire, and 14 Iraqi civilians were killed. Amid the murky accounts, several Raven 23 members were charged with manslaughter, had charges dropped amid prosecutor misconduct, were recharged and then convicted, then had those sentences thrown out and reduced. Prosecutors tried Slatton 3 times before they got a murder conviction and life sentence for him in 2017, a decade after the tragedy. The pardons have been widely criticized internationally as unjust. Supporters of Raven 23 say it's a long-awaited vindication. Coming up next week on Full Measure.
A trip to the U.S.-Mexico border, where by many accounts a crisis isn't looming, it's already here. The impact of overnight changes under the Biden administration are already being felt, and U.S. communities are being told to brace for mass releases of illegal immigrants in their towns.
I don't have soup kitchens. I don't have a facility to even put someone in to put beds in to make them, the restrooms part of it, none of it. We don't have it here. We're not used to that. So.
We investigate the rapidly changing face of the border next week on Full Measure.
Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. We leave you with a little more of that Nashville sound.